I think it's going. Yeah,
Oh,
so
good stuff.
I actually grew up in a little backstory for everybody here, I guess. I actually grew up in Phoenix. So when you're talking about triple digit heat, I know exactly how that goes, and that is not fun.
Yeah, you get used to it after a while, when you live in it, but it definitely gets hot. Makes you appreciate air conditioners in your car.
Yes, yes, it does. I remember vividly having a towel in my car, a little truck I was driving at the time, and I would wrap the towel around the steering wheel when I would get back in. It's like Mission Impossible when you're putting your seatbelt on. You don't
Oh,
want to touch, you're like, I hope I don't brand myself right now with my seatbelt. So
yeah.
it's wild. So yeah, I can empathize. Hey, for everyone watching, I know we're going live here in our Facebook group, How to Market and Sell Insurance to Seniors. I have Tony Marwan here with me today. Tony, I could introduce you. I'd love for you to kind of introduce yourself. I don't want to mess it up here.
No worries. And certainly thanks for having me on. This is a great
Yeah.
pleasure and a privilege. But for those that don't know me, again, my name is Tony Merwin. I am I'm Senior Marketing Director with Precision Senior Marketing, wholesale brokerage. But I've been in the insurance industry for 16 years. Started out as a captive agent banging on doors with a company called Family Heritage. About 14 months or so after working with them, I was introduced to the Medicare space by a couple of guys that have become my friends. I've been working with them now for over a decade, but Joshua and Lucas Vandenberg introduced me to the Medicare space. I realized that there was a lot more opportunity, and it was a little more my cup of tea working directly with seniors. I had a lot of experience in college working in assisted living centers, had a great relationship with my own grandparents. So it felt really natural gravitating to a market where I could have a direct relationship and a direct effect on the quality of life for senior citizens. So I started working as an independent agent for myself with a variety of different carriers selling Medicare supplement products. This was back really before Medicare Advantage had even gotten into the space because that
That's
didn't come
that's
around
how
till about
old. If
2005.
if anyone's trying to figure out just how old Tony is, he just gave it away right there. He was selling insurance before Medicare Advantage was even a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest piece of technology I had when I was out in the field was a fax machine. There were no e-applications. You could barely get a PDF version of the app from an insurance company to try and utilize that. You pretty much always had to order supplies, and they were even though fax there was fax apps. It was so weird because none of the apps that you would get from an insurance company were single sided. They were all double sided, which you can't, you end up having to make copies or you have to fax it twice
Just a
on the opposite
nightmare.
sheet. So it was kind
Yeah.
of silly that they're like, hey, we have a fax app program, but here's all of our apps are two-sided. So have fun with that. Um, so and then in 2010, I was invited to come on board with Josh and Lucas with PSM and just help grow it. The timing was perfect. It was right when a lot of the EAP technology started to come onto the space and things were evolving rapidly. Medicare Advantage had been around for about 5 years, was starting to see some improvements. And then now after 10 years, we're doing a lot of business out there in the market. We focus pretty much exclusively on the Medicare space, but we do about $50 million a year in Medicare supplements, about another 20,000 apps in Medicare Advantage, and just, really enjoying it and staying ahead of the curve.
Doing a good amount of business. So, you guys at here in the Facebook group and everything that we do content related at Lead Heroes, Tony and I were having a conversation just earlier this week, and something came up that I thought was just gold that I would love to have him talk more about. And I would love to kind of continue the conversation about. So we were talking about, the difference between using, as Tony put it, your elbow grease, which again is, your time essentially, versus money. And this is specifically when it comes to the senior insurance market. So, Tony, obviously, as he just mentioned, has been in this business for a long time. He's seen a lot. I'm sure he has also spent a lot on marketing money over the years. And so, yeah, that's really kind of the core conversation I wanted to have with Tony and share with you guys. And it's not that there's going to be like a right or wrong answer here, because for everyone, you're going to be on a different end of the spectrum. If you're a brand new agent and you're just cutting your teeth and you have no idea what you're doing, you're going to want to use a lot more of your time. Whereas if you have a lot of money to invest in this business, you're going to probably want to use more money and less of your time, etc. So yeah, Tony, take it away from there. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, you're spot on, and as I said, when we were talking some about this on, I think it was Tuesday, I always felt like when it came to marketing, there were two knobs, if you would, that you could turn on. And depending on how much you turned up one, you could turn down the other one. And that was basically the knob of elbow grease versus the knob of money. When it comes to marketing, the more elbow grease you put into it, the less money that you necessarily have to, but certainly the more money you can throw at your marketing, the less time, effort, or elbow grease that you have to. And it certainly depends on, the style of marketing that you're doing, or maybe truly your business model, because you want your marketing to match up with your business model, right? If you're doing field sales, then certainly grassroots marketing can definitely help you, running around, making introductions, building referral partners. I remember when I first started, I was out there doing my own grassroots marketing with flyers and guerrilla marketing type stuff, introducing myself to senior resident communities, trying to make a relationship with that resident manager, butter her up with some cookies or something, let her know that I know what I'm talking about, so that I could try to get in there and run a meeting for their whole group of seniors.
Tony, you should really be sharing what you're grilling if you're trying to generate
You're
referrals.
Probably, well, I wasn't grilling back then. I didn't have that expertise.
Yeah.
So,
if you want me to direct more agents your way, that's what I need some brisket. That's what I really need.
Understood. Well, I will tell you this. My wife was at the store earlier today. She picked up 2 nice briskets.
There you go.
We are going to be doing some cooking, and we're going to drop some more video on it this weekend. So look forward to that.
Yeah. If you guys need cooking tips beyond insurance tips, definitely follow Tony here on Facebook.
I feel like I've kind of got my brisket smoking down to a pretty good science. About the last 5 times I've done it, it's come out real consistent. And those are the same kind of results you're looking in your marketing. You want to try to create a system that creates consistent results day in and day out. And that's when you've found something that works that you can now scale.
Yeah. And this kind of goes back to CPA too. What's your target for your customer acquisition cost, right? If you have a target that's really low, if you're trying to only spend $100, again, you're going to end up using more elbow grease. As an agent myself previously, I spent a lot of time early in my career door knocking. And then from door knocking, that kind of evolved from cold door knocks to now I'm door knocking aged leads. Now I'm door knocking, fresh direct mail leads. Now I'm calling to set appointments with these direct mail leads. Now I'm hiring someone to call my leads to set appointments for me. And I'm just going on preset appointments. And again, as you continue to climb this ladder, you're spending more and more money, and you might actually be less profitable, right? Obviously, if you're cold door knocking, there's no expense to that. And if you close a sale, that's all profit. Whereas by the time you get all the way up to a preset appointment, or if you're selling over the phone and it's a qualified live transfer, for example, now you're spending hundreds of dollars, somewhere between, it could be 100, could be 200. I've talked to call center partners that we work with at Lead Heroes, and some of them are as comfortable as $300 or $400 for a CPA, which makes it really hard to compete with, as an independent agent or a small brokerage. You might not have $400 to spend. So, Tony, what would you say, where do you think the sweet spot is in these two dials? Or I almost kind of look at it as a scale, right? It's like the more money you put on it, it kind of goes back and forth. So what do you think the sweet spot is for an agent who is in the field or they're on the phone? Where's that happy middle ground, you think, for most people?
I would, and it's in my opinion, and it's going to depend really where you're coming from or where you're starting from. I mean, if you're starting and you got some money to invest in yourself right up front, outstanding, because then you're going to be able to hit the ground running a lot faster. But I would say ultimately any commissions that you're making, you want to be able to invest probably 30% of that back into your marketing efforts to keep you moving in the right direction, right? So, probably a 50-50 mix is probably really solid, until you get to the point where the money that you're making can dominate your efforts, right? And you're not out there having to really push your elbow grease. Your elbow grease is all spent in selling and not just generating business, right? And your money is now working for you and generating business.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And something that just popped in my head as Tony was talking there, this kind of circles back to something that I'm super passionate about, that I talk a ton about to agents, is tracking, right? So, if you're trying to figure out what's successful for you, or again, what is your CPA? I can't even tell you how many agents probably can't even answer that question. I know for a fact, I just talked to an agent last week where I asked that question. He had absolutely no idea what his acquisition cost was, even though he was buying leads from us. So, if you are on this scale, right, which essentially every agent is, before you can really figure out what works best for you, you should really also have a system in place to track so you can see how much you're spending and what that acquisition is. And are you happy with, your return on investment or your return on your time as investment, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I started, I wasn't door knocking. I had come from that world already. And then in the Medicare space, it wasn't my favorite thing to do. Unless I could get into what I knew was a dominant senior community, then maybe, yeah. And I was allowed to door knock, then I would. But I spent my time telemarketing. I would buy a list that I could get for about $50, give me about 1,000 names, scrubbed against the DNC, and then just immediately start calling them and trying to set appointments. And that was awesome, except that it was a lot of elbow grease, right? Because I'm not having to put much money into it. But just kind of the illustration that you made earlier about if you are knocking on doors and you make a sale, that's pretty much all profit towards you. It was real similar in that aspect because, I might spend a full 8 hours telemarketing, but if I could get a sale out of it, or I could get 3 or 4 or 5 appointments to help fill up my week, I was only spending $50 on the list and then just my time in the day. So at some point I did start to look at how much was my hourly rate to a certain extent, and how much is the time that I'm spending, how do I measure my hourly rate in this? And I would start to look at my marketing in that aspect before I ever really started to learn CPA.
Yeah. And, for me personally, as a business owner, and essentially, and again, this was something we talked about in detail earlier this week, really the agents who are most successful they're structuring their sales as a business. They're not approaching this like it's a sales job. Right.
Yeah.
So, I think having this tracked, knowing your CPA, knowing your return on your time, which I think gets left out of the equation a lot. I came from a retail sales background before I got into insurance, and I was working, I made good money, but I was working 60 hours a week, and I wasn't in charge of my schedule. So when I initially jumped into insurance at the time, I was really looking to really get my time back more than anything. Mm-hmm. So, that's another critical part of this too, not just the dollars and cents, but, are you happy with the amount of time you're spending? Do you want to invest more of your time, less of your time? And then again, potentially looking at hiring agents, right? I mean, if you're wanting to scale up from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the truth is, if you're just looking for a sales job, go get a job at an agency and sell insurance for them. But if you want to build a business, then you're going to have to approach this like a business. And if you're lacking in that savvy, there's places to learn it. There's Facebook groups you can tie into where people teach you how to build a business. You can certainly take classes in marketing and business administration. I mean, there's a lot of ways to learn to crack that nut. But if you don't approach this like a business in all aspects, ultimately you're setting yourself up for failure. You might flounder around and make money, but if you don't take that approach, you're truly just setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be curious to know, Tony, I don't think we really touched on this earlier, but from a tracking perspective, when it comes to marketing, is there some tools that you like, or that agents that you work with use, or, ones that you've heard discussed in the community that you think is worth a second look that you'd want to share?
Radius Bob is a tool that comes up pretty regularly that agents tell me they're able to track all their stuff on. I don't have any personal experience with it, so it's hard for me to say. I talk to other agents or agencies that are using Agency Block as a tool that helps them track commissions, but there's a whole bunch of ways you can slice that pie. When I did it, I was using Act software because there was not all the cool tech tools that there are now, but I loved Act software because it did have a sales forecasting program in it. So once I started to learn, like, hey, when I buy a list of 1,000 names and I spend the time marketing, this is the numbers that I can start to expect. So this is the profit I can start to expect. So then as I plugged my contacts in that I was creating, it was sales forecasting for me automatically.
Yeah, that's huge.
So that gave me a really good idea of what I can project my commissions to be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks from now. So all I got to do now is focus on activity. and
So
I'm going to see that in result.
that's right. And to translate that for anyone watching or listening to this too, that's data-driven decision making. That's exactly what I just heard from Tony. And that's so crucial, you guys. It really is. If you don't know these things, if you, like, for example, if you don't know what your cost per lead is, your cost per acquisition is, if you know exactly how much money you're going to spend and you don't know these numbers, you can't project your sales. You can't project what you need to spend on marketing, et cetera. So it makes it so much easier to be in business. Again, this is coming from someone who's been messy previously from a business perspective without tracking all these figures. And then I've done it the other way too, where I've been just meticulous about tracking the dollars and cents and being organized and basically just following the money, right? Whatever makes most sense, dollars and cents wise, letting that lead. Yeah. And I can't agree with that more. And Radius Bob is something that personally I've messed around with. I actually had a conversation with the owner, Clue, and it's a program built for insurance agents specifically. And that's something that I think sets it apart from a lot of these CRMs out there. There's so many different options. I mean, probably 1,000 different CRMs you could pick from. And it's not that one's necessarily better than the other. Figure out what works best for you. Some are going to be better for agency situations. So if you are managing a downline of agents versus if it's just you and you're trying to track for your own sales. But the bottom line is, I think Tony and I both agree, you have to have some idea of what these numbers look like, and trying to do it, mentally or just guessing is not a great way to run your business.
Yeah. I mean, at the very bottom end, you can do it with an Excel spreadsheet, worst case scenario, right? Because
Yes.
if you know how to run Excel properly, you can develop sales forecasting and then number tracking in there. It's not that difficult. It just takes some time. It's not the optimal way to do it. There's software that can help you do it much better. But if you're coming from a zero budget standpoint, at least get, Microsoft Office and start using it. That was a way that I got started until I did have some money to go buy the ACT software, which back then wasn't cheap, and it wasn't an online cloud CRM and piece of software. It was a disk that you had to go buy and download in your computer and
Right.
learn how to run it. But it was a super cool piece, and it really helped me out, helped me get organized. It helped me track my sales forecasting. It also helped me do drip marketing, sales letters. It was awesome, and I would say definitely look for some of those tools if you are looking for a good piece of software in CRM. But something I was going to say is you're not going to have those numbers right up front, right? You're not going to know what your CPA is right up front. You're going to have to plug data in for a while.
Correct.
And the bigger your sample size gets, the more data you're going to have, the more tight you're going to be able to get that range, and the more you're going to be able to zero in and target exactly what you're looking for. You're going to see the failures, like, oh, this marketing's not working for me so good because now I've got a sample size big enough to see this one's costing me a lot more money or time or both. And this one's actually producing much better results. And you can start to reshift and target the systems that are working better for you.
150%. And to touch on that topic. So, two separate things that I experienced last week, again, being at Lead Heroes, running a lead generation marketing company for you guys, for insurance agents. And here's two opposite ends of the spectrum experience based on what Tony just said, right? So Tony's talking about sample size. The larger the data sample, the more leads that you've worked, the more activity that you've had, the more accurate your data is. So, two different agents I'm working with literally last week, one of them gets through 250 leads, says while it went well, he said he didn't feel like he had enough data yet, and he wanted to keep going, right? So he's going beyond 250 leads, and he's still just really trying to get a sample size for what he's going to expect for accuracy, for all these things that we just talked about, acquisition, projections, et cetera. And then on the flip side of it, having an agent that didn't even quite get to 50 leads, and he was ready to pass judgment on what to expect. And again, it's mind blowing to kind of see both sides of it. And I think I get a little jaded because I'm behind the scenes and I get to see kind of all of it. And I try to explain it to people. But yeah, I mean, that's really the bottom line is the law of large numbers is what is really the ultimate truth. If you've worked 1,000 leads, whether it's our leads, direct mail leads, internet leads, live transfers, whatever your program is, or you're knocking 1,000 doors, or you're making 1,000 phone calls, there's really a minimum that you need to work through to find accuracy in your data. If you just work 10 leads, you knock 10 doors, 10 phone calls, there's just not enough data, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. If I remember correctly, I wanted to say I was about 2,000 hours in, because I did mine at the time. I was trying to base it on an hourly rate because I really didn't have my head wrapped around CPA at the time, and nobody was teaching me that. So everything that I'd come from previously was all based on how much am I earning per hour and how am I maximizing my time spent per hour, how much am I valuing myself per hour.
Right.
So I was about 2,000 hours in before I really started to realize, okay, this is the marketing that is worth my time, right? This is the one that's getting me the hourly rate that I feel like I should be earning.
And, to kind of stay on topic here, but also kind of transition to, what's going on with the coronavirus, COVID-19, these lockdowns. I personally am under the belief, now that we've been doing this for almost 60 days, with all of this going on, I actually think marketing dollars are going further. Again, it kind of depends on your situation, what you're marketing, where you're marketing. But I think for most of the clients that we work with at Lead Heroes, we're actually seeing that there's a higher pickup rate, which means if you as an agent are talking to more of your leads, you're going to naturally get more. It's really that simple. Just like we just talked about a second ago, if you have 1,000 people and you only got half of them on the phone versus getting 3/4 of them on the phone, not saying that's exactly what's going to be your experience, but if you get a 50% higher, whatever the jump is, 10%, 20%, 30%, all of those additional conversations you're having are going to naturally aggregate into more sales. So, I think initially there was a lot of agents who were sitting sidelines with everything going on, and they wanted to kind of feel out, what's going to happen? Should I keep spending marketing dollars, or is this going to be a bad idea because of the coronavirus or COVID-19? But I honestly think there's never been a better time to be selling insurance than right now. So Tony, what do you think about everything going on? Is there anything you would share with anyone watching or listening this in regards to the coronavirus? I know you mentioned that you're going to be back in your office here soon. So, I mean, that's fantastic news. I think that's really good news.
Yeah, Texas is reopening, as are many other states. So there's going to be another shift happening right now, that agents need to start to think about their marketing 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks ahead in schedule to get kind of prepared as those phases kind of open back up, where people are going to slowly start to be more apt to taking field appointments, for example. And if that's your business model, get yourself ready, right? Start preparing some direct mail campaigns that are going to help model you towards that, right? If you're a telesales agent, then not too much changes for you. You might see a small dip for those people that go back to doing field business, but probably not. The truth is just be prepared.
And part of it too, obviously being in the senior market in our target segment, the virus hasn't gone away. Even if things do consistently get better from here, which we don't know, but I think you're going to find the senior market's still probably going to be a lot more telesales focused, really, regardless of the next 90 days or so.
Yeah, for multiple reasons. I mean, you're still going to have seniors that are, number one, hesitant to have people in their home. They're like, I'm not, y'all say it's open, but my house isn't open yet. I'm not ready for anybody to come over here yet. So obviously they're looking for telesales, but then you also have that group of seniors that have now learned by force, right? That it's really not that hard to do business over the phone. Right. They weren't doing it before, but they're turning 65 and they need to get their Medicare stuff straightened out. And they were forced by nature of everything that's happened to have to figure out how to do it by phone. And so I know there's a group of folks out there that have now, again, been forced into that environment, that have conducted all their Medicare business or their life insurance business by phone now. And they're realizing, well, this isn't that hard. Why wasn't I doing this all along? Why was I inviting an agent to come out to my house and make me sit belly to belly with him? His breath stinks. He's not that good looking, and I'm having to have him invade my home. Now they're like, well, this is pretty simple, and they'll probably continue to do that. Yeah. So certainly COVID has created a situation. It's definitely created a ripple effect in the insurance industry, which is going to affect it for years to come, and probably forever, where more and more people are going to be apt to doing business by phone. So, and I'm not trying to discourage agents that like to do field sales. I always loved field sales, and I still love face-to-face. And it's probably the poker player in me that loves that organic side. But I love being able to look at somebody across the way from me, and I get a better feeling from them. That's my personal preference. But I'm also older school. I've been doing this a long time. So there were no telesales when I was in the game. But the truth is, if you want to have an edge in the space, you need to start to really get yourself prepared, if you're not already, to being able to conduct sales by phone, because people are going to start demanding it more and more and more. It's a simplified issue product. There's not a lot of moving parts in it. And you really just need to adjust your skill game and get ready for it. There'll always be a place for field sales.
Yeah.
Well, on a larger scale, telesales is where it's at.
And I think too, so if there's any agency owners, listening or watching this, I think it's time to at least offer a strong option for telesales. Before the pandemic, a lot of times it was like, we do field sales, we really don't do telesales, or they had a really weak telesales offering. I think you want to be able to offer an agent both options, because it's going to probably be personal preference for the agent and for the seniors, as we're moving forward on how they want to conduct business. But I do think too, guys, that and something that I kind of even struggle to wrap my head around, but there's going to be a lot of insurance agents and insurance organizations that basically don't move forward from this, because they were so focused on face-to-face sales. They never had an option to sell over the phone. So again, there's less competition if you're an insurance agent than there's probably ever been, at least for the recent future, or the modern history here. So I think that, again, just so much opportunity. I know people are scared. I know a lot of people have kind of sat on the sidelines, but ultimately there's more opportunity, I think, in our market now than there's ever been. And when it comes to income, which is so massively affected right now, most seniors who are retired, their income didn't get affected. Am I right, Tony?
For the most part, yeah, because they're still getting their Social Security, which is usually what most of them have anyway to deal with and budget on. Right. And the only way a senior can make money is to save it. So if if you can attack, and attack may not be the right word, but if you can go out there with that approach and that understanding, and with some empathy, that hey, these seniors are on fixed income. How can I help them truly maximize what they're getting from their Social Security?
Absolutely.
And I would love to just kind of reinforce what you said in regards to, there are some agencies that may not come out on the other side. You were 100% correct. And I can say that with a fact, because there were, right when this was onset, right at the onset of this, there were agencies that I work with that were calling me, and they were deeply ingrained to field sales. That was their model. That's all they did. And they were great at it. They were doing millions of dollars at it. And then this happens, and they're on the phone with me going, hey, how do we convert everybody to telesales all of a sudden? Like, what are we doing? And they were lost, and they're having to now adjust their game. And it's that much more challenging for them, because they're weeks behind. I mean, technically they're years behind, but it took them weeks to get caught up. I'm talking to field sales agencies that are seeing a 50% drop in new business. They're used to doing 500,000 a month. Now they're doing 250,000 a month, because they weren't prepared.
Yep.
It's a perfect example of the book, Who Moved My Cheese? The cheese has just been moved big time. And if you're not familiar with that book already, you should get familiar with it. But it's learning how to monitor where your source of income, where your source of security is at. And when it gets moved without your control, are you prepared to adjust to it and adapt to it? And that book couldn't be more, this situation could be more timely as a representation of that book, because everybody's cheese just got moved in the last 4 weeks, and a lot of agents had no clue where it went.
It's funny you mentioned that. I've heard that book talked about so many. I've never read. Now I'm going to have to read it now that you just brought it up again. But
it's an easy read, but it's such a great lesson.
Yeah. And where's your money?
In so many ways.
Where's your money at? And I kind of touched on that too with, I was talking to Christian Brindle the other week, and, it was our discussion. We're talking about, how you can kind of diversify yourself to protect yourself with what's going on right now. And, Tony was just talking about saving people money if they're on a fixed income, which most seniors are. So, if you are a life agent and you've exclusively been selling life insurance for the past 3, 5, 10 years, however long you've been in the business, now might be a good time to start looking at diversifying into the health side. It's a significant, in my opinion, and again, I've done this both, you guys. I've sold Medicare products. I've sold final expense. Medicare was always an easier conversation to bring up. When you can lead into the conversation with, hey, Mrs. Jones, I'm the licensed agent. I just want to see if you're overpaying for your existing Medicare options. Let's just give me 30 seconds here. Let me check. I might save you $1,000 a year. I just helped, Jane over here, or, I just called Jane over here and she was overpaying by $200 a month. It was crazy. Let me just see if I can save you some money. And Tony, actually, I saw you commented on someone else's, but it was actually Christian's post about saving someone money. And you said you have a new best friend. And that, while it was kind of, I'm sure you were kind of like joking, but he's not lying. He's not lying at all. You create a best friend when you save that much money. They're going to tell people, they're going to say, you need to call Tony. You need to call Glenn. They just saved me $2,000 a year and nothing changed. I'm getting the same health benefits that I was getting last month. And again, I've been doing this long enough. We've lost clients at Lead Heroes. We've had agents and agency owners stop buying leads because they built up their book. They're getting so many referrals that, Monday through Friday, their phone's ringing off the hook. They don't need leads. They just need to handle the people calling them already.
Yeah. That's one of the things I love about this business is that reward when you do really fix someone up and save them that much money. And you can see how thankful and appreciative they are. I earned a whole bunch of new grandparents as I went through the field and saved a lot of these single ladies, that were just living off their little Social Security check money, and they loved me. They'd bake cookies for me. They'd call me up, and all I ever did other than write them the policy was just call them, wish them happy birthday and say thanks.
Yeah.
Final expense is to go backwards a little bit. Final expense was always a cross market product for me.
Yeah.
So that was the only other thing I did. Other than that, I always led with MedSup. And to go back to reinforce what you were saying, MedSup isn't, or Medicare, not just MedSup, but Medicare in general is a easier conversation to have for multiple reasons. Number one, it's a commodity product, basically, right? We all need health insurance. We all know at some point we're going to get sick. We're not going to feel good. We want to be able to go to the doctor and get taken care of, right? For some reason, we all fool ourselves that death is so far away that we don't have to worry about life insurance, right? So a lot of times it is harder, and that's not to disparage final expense agents, because there are guys out there crushing it in the final expense space and then cross-marketing Medicare behind it. But for me, Medicare was always the easier lead in because it was a conversation that needed to be had. And that's even more so now because health has now become a big uncertainty, right?
Yes.
I brought this up on another podcast, but if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the bottom two rungs of that pyramid are very fresh in everyone's brain right now. My health, the protection of my future, and the protection of my life. The bottom two things that we would normally sometimes take for granted, and we're always hanging out at the peak of that hierarchy. Now everybody's concerned about those bottom two, right? And so health insurance has become super important and super open for people to talk about right now because they know they need it. They know that their health is a concern, and there is a new disease out there, if you will, that has shaken up the health industry. And am I covered? Do I need something better? What's going to happen to me if I get COVID-19, right?
Absolutely.
So it's a great talking point right now. And
Absolutely.
as an agent, you want to be empathetic of that.
Yeah. I mean, and not to, I guess, be morbid, but I mean, what could create a better sales atmosphere, right, for a life and health insurance agent than an infectious disease, right? I mean, it's a terrible thing. I wish COVID could disappear tomorrow. I'm ready for my state here, Washington, to open back up so I can go about my usual business. But yeah, I mean, as an insurance agent, you're an essential worker. You've been deemed an essential worker by governments all around the world because it's an essential service that people need. It's extremely important what we're doing, more important than potentially, again, ever in modern history, because people need to make sure that they're covered for health. They need to make sure that they're covered on their life if something were to go wrong. I kind of thought early on that we might see a lot of insurance carriers just start dumping, especially on the senior population because of the mortality rates. But the vast majority, from what I've seen and heard, of these life insurance carriers are still accepting applications, especially for final expense. So, you have the life insurance carriers who are still helping folks out. The government's basically telling you you're an essential worker. We want you to keep working. And you have prospects who are more than ever in modern. I mean, I don't know how far I'd be willing to go back, 50 years, 100 years. I don't know. But you have people that are more willing to listen to you right now than ever. And I just can't stress that point enough. I was skeptical when everything first kind of fell out. I wanted to see what was going on. I saw a bunch of telesales agents talking about how great the environment was right now for sales, for both on the Medicare and the final expense side. And I am a believer now more than ever after talking to, our partners here at Lead Heroes, and just talking with agents all over, So again, I can't stress it enough. If you're sitting on the sideline, if you're a new agent, if you're not even licensed yet, and Tony, maybe if you could share this, I've seen some posts talking about on social media, talking about temporary insurance licenses. Do you have anything you could share on that about talking about temporary licensing?
Yeah, and it's going to vary by state, but I can tell you specifically Texas and Oklahoma are allowing temporary licenses. Matter of fact, Texas is even waiving the $100 fee that you would normally need to get a temporary license. But you can basically, all you got to do is pass a background check. You can pass a background check. If you're not a felon, you can get a temporary license that gives you 90 days to practice insurance, right? Get rolling, test it out, if you will. See maybe if that's a new career path for you. When COVID finally drops, they're going to give you another 30 days to go get your permanent license. And then you can continue on. So there's a lot of opportunity in that regards too. And that'll vary by state. So if you're not in Texas or Oklahoma, certainly check out with your state DOI. But many states offer a temporary insurance license right now that will especially if you're furloughed, right? Or you're laid off from your job because it's not essential or whatever the case is. This might be a way, whether it's a side hustle for you or a whole new opportunity. Because the market is big, it is growing very fast, especially the senior space. You got 10,000 people getting on Medicare every day nationwide, and that's not going to stop for another 6 years plus. And it's still not going to stop. It's just going to slow down a little, just a little bit. And you're still going to have thousands daily coming into the Medicare field. And then, as you mentioned, life insurance carriers, they're still selling. Telesales they've all seen spikes. I want to say the last article I read was that life insurance carriers were seeing a 24% spike in online applications. Wow. So they're not slowing down either. There's been a few carriers make some minor changes, right? Just a little adjustments to the underwriting, but by and large, it's still getting sold. Health insurance is going crazy. And the opportunity is definitely there, and agents can certainly take advantage of it. The telesales guys that I talk to are like, man, I'm busier more now than I've ever been.
Yeah.
That's a fact. I've heard that.
I've heard that those exact words I've heard from so many agents. I was looking at the Washington DOI since I live in Washington State, and I don't feel like they had this sort of liberal temporary license that Texas has, but I was hearing Texas was turning around temporary licenses in like 24 hours, which is wild. And if you are on license and you're listening to this or you're watching this, typically to get an insurance license, you have to go through an online or an in-person course, again, this is totally specific to the state. Every state's a little different. But a lot of times you have to take an in-person or an online course. You have to pass that course. Then you have to take a test. You only get so many tries to pass this test. It's kind of like a driver's license, right? The government's testing you, then you get your license. And then you can start selling insurance. I mean, that's a process that typically takes most agents between 1 and 4 weeks. And you're investing a lot of time. You're investing a lot of money. And here we are, with everything going on, and we're talking about opportunities. So even if you're not a licensed insurance agent, the opportunity is greater than ever. You can start selling insurance in probably less than a week. And then you can go get your license later officially, based on the state. So, again, if you aren't licensed right now, I highly recommend reaching out to your Department of Insurance. Ask them if they are issuing temporary insurance licenses. And if they are, ask them what you need to do to get one. What about the fingerprinting? That's one thing too. So with the background check, are they making, I heard one state, I want to say it may have been Florida. I think police stations were offering to do the fingerprinting for insurance agents. I don't know. I
had heard some of that too. When I originally got my license, I went to the sheriff's department and got fingerprinted. I just went.
I'm surprised they let you out. They let you out of the sheriff's office?
Kind of was too. Well, it was funny. They already had them on record anyway, but they were like, no, you still got to get new ones. I jest a little. But yeah, certainly some of the police departments or sheriff's departments will be able to do them for you. You can go on Identigo, I think is one of the
Yes.
ones that's recognized by Sercon, and get a schedule to get them done. But
Mhm.
in Texas, as I remember, for the temp license, you don't even need your fingerprints. You just kind of pass a background check. That's it. You'll need to get your fingerprints done when you get the permanent license, though.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you'll have to, pass that test. They're not
And you'll have
necessarily
to pass the
saying,
test. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, they're not saying you don't have to do these things, but
Right.
they're willing to forgo those,
Yeah.
and so you
They'll
can
give you a
start
90-day shot to check it out.
Yeah, which is huge. It's a free, 90-day free look. That's wild. I quit my career. I quit my salary without knowing how things were going to work out when I jumped into insurance. So I wish I could have had this like 90-day free look where I didn't have to spend any time. I could have just gone out into the field and started selling right away. So that's another massive opportunity, you guys.
Mhm.
Tony and I, we would love to set up some type of poker tournament for insurance agents virtually here as things are still locked down across the U.S. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Tony, anything else as we're wrapping up here that you'd like to share with any listeners or people watching this live stream or watching the recording later?
Nothing necessarily major, but I would just tell agents activity will always precede profit. You're going to have to put in the activity first. Build a plan of your activity, right? Build a goal set. Something that I always lived by, and I still do, is what I call an 8-week plan. I always plan 8 weeks out ahead, right? What do I want to accomplish at the end of 8 weeks? What is my goal there? And then backtrack it to how much activity do I have to put starting today to get myself at the end of that 8 weeks. And then about every 4 weeks, I would kind of readjust it and build it out another 8 weeks. And that's a great way to start. That's going to help you start to create activity and help you build that sample size that you need to get back to figuring out, how much elbow grease or money you're going to have to start throwing at your goals to get them accomplished.
Yeah, right back to that scale, that dynamic scale that we've been talking about. And, one thing the final thoughts that I'll kind of share with you guys that Tony just mentioned, I can't tell you how many times I've seen agents come into this field who are less talented and across the board, right? So they're not great salespeople. Maybe they don't even speak English very well, right? So I've seen people who, whatever their background is, right? Just come in, have super high activity levels, and just crush some of the most talented salespeople in the industry. So yeah, regardless of whether you're a brand new agent, if you think you're bad at sales, if you have a massive activity level, just like Tony was talking about, ultimately you're going to come out on top every time. So yeah, just focus on activity, talk to the people, right? Talk to the people. The more conversations you have, the more sales you're going to make.
Absolutely.
Tony, what's the best way someone could find you or get a hold of you if they wanted to chat with you some more?
I'm certainly super active on Facebook. So look me up, shoot me a friend request if you want. I'm more than happy to help you out. I'm accessible by phone. I have an 800 number, 800-998-7715. Just ask for Tony. I'm the only Tony there. But I would say ultimately just look me up on Facebook. I'm easy to locate there and I'm super active. That's probably the quickest way to find me, truthfully, especially
Cool.
if you're listening to this podcast, because you're obviously listening to it on Facebook.
You're right there. Yeah, absolutely. And you guys, I'm hoping to have some more guests, some great guests, just like Tony. Appreciate Tony offering his time today to chat here and share some of his insights. But yeah, feel free to comment. I'm sure Tony would love to answer, if you guys had some questions, if there's anything specifically that we talked about, feel free to comment on this live stream, on this video, and, I'll do my best. And I'm sure Tony would love to help out answering any questions you guys might have.
Absolutely. I'd be more than happy. Thank you so much, Glenn. I really appreciate it.
All right, no problem. Thank you, Tony. And until next time, you guys, happy selling.